Football exists outside of Europe's Big Five leagues. I know, this may come as a surprise, but they play football in Honduras now, Japan, even Azerbaijan. The concentration of wealth in football, though, and the concentration of media coverage and eyeballs, means that a lot of people never look beyond the Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga, Serie A, and, at a stretch, Ligue. This is a grave mistake, though. They're missing out on the big Yerevan derby between Ararat and Punic in Armenia every season, Sturm Graz bringing Red Bull Salzburg's run of 10 straight Austrian Bundesliga titles to an end last season, and Ängelholm women going invincible and not even conceding a single goal all season in Sweden's 4th tier of women's football last season, but still somehow managing to miss out on the league title by 1 point. All far more interesting, I'm sure you'd agree, than Manchester City winning yet another Premier League title, or Real Madrid lifting their 97th Champions League. So in today's video, I'm bringing back a video that I first made almost 7 years ago, and taking a look at some of the best players outside of Europe's Big Five leagues. The 7 back then, just in case you were wondering, because I found it quite interesting, consisted of Danilo Pereira, then of Porto, who went on to join PSG and in 2024 Al Ittihad, Sporting's Rui Patricio, who soon joined Wolves, followed by Roma and now plays for Atalanta, Hulk, who was at Shanghai SIPG at the time and now plays for Atletico Mineiro, aged 38, Benfica's Lubomir Feysa, who went on to star for Al Ahly and Partizan Belgrade, Besiktas centre-back Pepe, who joined Porto in 2019 and was still starring for both them and Portugal until his retirement in the summer, age 41, former Brazilian international Jonas, who retired at Benfica in 2019, and Uruguayan goalkeeper Fernando Muslera, who has been Galatasaray's #1 since 2011 and actually now ranks 4th in the club's all-time appearance charts. So yeah, quite interesting. This time around though, I am imposing myself with some rules. I'm not considering anyone over the age of 30, so there'll be no Lionel Messi or Neymar for example, just because I think that would be a bit boring, and hardly showing love to players unknown to Europe's Big Five leagues, and for the same reason, I'm also not including anyone who has already agreed to join a Big Five league club. And yes, that does mean no Estevao, who will join Chelsea in July 2025 and would otherwise have featured. Right, without further ado, who doesn't play for anyone these days, here are 7 of the best footballers from outside Europe's Big Five leagues, who are also under 30 and haven't agreed to join Big Five league clubs, with some honourable mentions thrown in at the end for good measure. 7th, Pedro Gonçalves. Sporting Club de Portugal, Sporting for short, or Sporting Lisbon for unsophisticated louts, are the outstanding team in European football outside of the Big Five leagues right now. Unstoppable in the Primeira Liga, Sporting cruised to the title with 90 points last season. They have won 10 out of 10 games so far this season, scoring a monumental 35 goals and only conceding 3, and, at the time of recording, they are 2nd in the overall Champions League standings out of 36 teams, following victories against Lille, Sturm Graz, and a thumping 4-1 win against Premier League champions Manchester City. 7 Sporting players made my shortlist for this 7, over twice as many players as there were from any other club, and it is Pedro Gonçalves who gets us started. Phenomenally good for Sporting for the last 4 seasons, still aged only 26, Gonçalves joined Sporting from Famalicão in 2020, having previously spent time in the youth ranks at Wolves. Gonçalves spent 2 years in Wolverhampton, but only made a solitary substitute appearance against Sheffield Wednesday in the EFL Cup. He instantly caught Sporting's eye at Famalicão though, who paid €6.5 million for 50% of his playing rights. In 2023, Sporting acquired a further 40% for €7.7 million. In his debut campaign, Gonçalves scored 23 goals predominantly from the right flank, earning himself a call-up to the Portugal squad. Given what he has done since then, it is remarkable that Gonçalves has still only won 3 caps for Portugal and didn't even make Roberto Martinez's Euro 2024 squad. So far this season, Gonçalves has scaled yet new heights. Now playing on the left flank, cutting inside onto his favoured right foot, Gonçalves has scored 5 goals and made 6 assists in 11 appearances so far this term, averaging a goal contribution every 78 minutes, including an assist against Manchester City during a game in which he ran Rico Lewis ragged. Against one of the best teams in Europe, Gonçalves had a 100% pass accuracy rate, 100% dribbles completed rate, and he created 4 chances, including 2 big chances, which was the most of any player on the pitch. But then again, the reality is that Gonçalves is currently one of the best players for one of the best teams in Europe in his own right. Such a brilliant all-rounder, Gonçalves is quick, he works hard, tracks back, and isn't afraid to put in a tackle. His attacking movement is outstanding, and in the final third, more often than not, he tends to make the right decision. I can think of few better players to get us started then, and if Portugal have any sense about them, they'll call him up for the next international break and look to finally integrate him fully into the national team setup ahead of the 2026 World Cup. 6th, António Silva. Staying in Portugal for now, which is the 7th best league in Europe, according to UEFA's country coefficients, and indeed staying in Lisbon, António Silva might not be playing in a Big 5 league yet, but it seems safe to assume that he will be very soon. A regular for Portugal already, aged 21, unlike Pedro Gonçalves, Portugal have 2 outstanding young centre-backs, 21-year-old Silva at Benfica, and 23-year-old Gonçalo Inácio at Sporting. Either could have made this 7, both were shortlisted, and I think that both are destined to start for super clubs at some stage in one of Europe's Big 5 leagues. For António Silva, the suspicion is that will likely come as soon as next season. Heavily linked with Manchester United, PSG, and RB Leipzig over the last couple of summers, Benfica president Rui Costa has basically tried to justify the sales of João Neves, Marcos Leonardo, and Gonçalo Ramos, among others, by pointing to the fact that he has refused to let go of António Silva. An athletic and aggressive front-footed centre-back who is also comfortable with the ball at his feet, it was perhaps only a wobble in his form during the second half of last season that prevented anyone from lodging a bid that Benfica would have found impossible to turn down in the summer. RB Leipzig's rumoured offer of just €25 million was derisory, even with Benfica having the slight insurance of Thomas Araujo now, and their supporters would have good reason to feel robbed if he departed for anything below double that amount. Capped 15 times by Portugal, and likely to become a stalwart and inherit an important leadership role following Pepe's retirement, Silva has already made more than 100 appearances in the Benfica first team, despite only turning 21 a week ago, and he is the only defender to make my 7. 5th, Rúben Neves. I promise you, not everyone in this 7 is Portuguese. Admittedly, there will be one more after this one, so that is 57.14% of the list, but not everyone, alright? Rúben Neves may have taken a proverbial axe to his career by moving to Saudi Arabia in the summer of 2023 to sign one of the fattest contracts in world football, when he was sought after by some of the biggest clubs in Europe, but he is still a sensational footballer. One of few Portuguese internationals to have kept their place in the national team following moves to Saudi Arabia, and one of even fewer to still play well for them. The first time that I watched Neves live was in only his 3rd game for Wolves, and in a game which also featured the likes of Jared Bowen and Diogo Jota, he stood out head and shoulders above everyone else. That was a theme which would continue throughout that season, as Wolves won the championship title, and Neves made the EFL Team of the Season. He really should have won the Championship Player of the Year award, which went to Fulham's Ryan Sessegnon, and there might not have been a better player to have played in the Championship during the modern era. The only player in this 7 so far to have actually appeared in one of Europe's Big 5 leagues, Neves made more than 250 appearances for Wolves, 177 of them coming in the Premier League. Linked with the likes of Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal and Barcelona during that time, in June 2023, shortly after turning 26 and coming into his absolute prime, Neves joined Al Hilal for £47 million. In fairness to Neves, unlike a lot of players who moved to Saudi Arabia, He didn't claim to do so because he was a footballing missionary looking to spread word of the sport to the Arabian Gulf or change attitudes towards LGBT people. Neves' initial response, when asked about his move by the BBC, was to say, quote, "Of course one of the things is the money. Of course, you cannot hide that." End quote. The money, reportedly, is a little over £400,000 a week, which is about 6 times what Neves was supposedly paid at Wolves. Still the youngest player to start a game as captain in the UEFA Champions League, having done so aged 18 and 221 days at Porto, Neves has wonderful vision, weight of pass, and he scores the occasional absolute wonder goal. Dropping from the Premier League to the Saudi Pro League will inevitably damage Neves' development irreparably, and long-term, it may well cost him his place in the Portugal team. For now, though, he remains a top-class, if not quite world-class midfielder, who would start for all but a handful of teams in world football. Consistently one of the best players in Saudi Arabia since his arrival, as you'd expect, Neves is one of 2 Saudi Pro League players to feature in this 7. Fourth, Moussa Diaby. I promised you not everyone in this 7 would be Portuguese, and we didn't have to wait long for the second Saudi Pro League player to feature. Long-term viewers will know that I was a big fan of Moussa Diaby at Bayer Leverkusen, where he spent 4 seasons after leaving PSG, departing on the advent of their invincible domestic double last season to join Aston Villa. Diaby didn't set the world alight at Villa, but by the same token, I thought that he had a perfectly respectable season settling in, making 54 appearances as Villa finished 4th, and chipping in with 10 goals and 9 assists. In Villa's highest league finish in over 30 years, literally no one played more games for them than Diaby, aged 24, in his debut campaign. The combination of a €60 million offer from Al Ittihad, profit and sustainability regulation concerns, and the returning Jadon Philogene led to Villa letting Diaby go, rather than losing someone like Ollie Watkins, but I still think that he is comfortably good enough to play for a top team in a top league, as is evidenced by his start to life in Jeddah. Arguably the best player in the Saudi Pro League so far this season, a statistical analysis of his performances paints him as one of the most informed players in the world. Fast, direct and good on the ball, Diaby hit double figures for 4 straight seasons for Leverkusen and Villa before turning 25, as well as winning 11 caps in an incredibly competitive France team. He may struggle to add to that playing for Al Ittihad. There were no Saudi-based players in Didier Deschamps' most recent squad, but he remains a huge talent and takes a spot in 4th. Third, Diogo Costa. The 4th and final Portuguese player to feature, and the best goalkeeper outside of the Big 5 leagues in world football in my view, Diogo Costa is now in his 4th season as Porto's undisputed number 1, still aged only 25. A brilliant modern-day sweeper keeper, Costa is very accomplished with the ball at his feet, his distribution is excellent, but so too are his reflexes and shot stopping. Not the tallest, for a goalkeeper at least, at 6'1". If you wanted to be hypercritical, Costa doesn't dominate or totally command his area, and he still has a tendency to make the odd high-profile mistake, but that would be being hypercritical. By and large, Costa's performance levels over the last few years have been superb, and he's not yet anywhere near his prime as a goalkeeper. Born in Switzerland to Portuguese parents, Costa joined Porto as an 11-year-old. He racked up 51 appearances for Porto's B team, where his performances were much lauded, including by Iker Casillas, Porto's number 1 at the time and one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time, who labelled Costa as his successor. His first team debut arrived within a week of Costa turning 20, and in the 2021-22 season, he wrestled the Porto number 1 shirt away from Argentina international Agustin Marquesan. Within 12 months, he'd also usurped Rui Patricio as Portugal's number 1. A regular for Portugal at every single youth level since the age of 14, Costa has already won 31 caps for the senior team, putting him well on course to overtake Patricio one day as the country's most capped goalkeeper of all time. I said the most capped, to be clear, not the most clapped. He's actually perfectly alright looking. You know, for a keeper anyway. Named as the Premier Liga Goalkeeper of the Year in his first 2 seasons as Porto's number 1, unsurprisingly, Costa's talents haven't gone unnoticed by big 5 league clubs. Barcelona were long rumoured to be great admirers, but it is Bayern Munich, in search of a long-term replacement for Manuel Neuer, who now appear to be in the driving seat. Costa has a €75 million release clause written into his contract at Porto, but Bayern are reportedly hoping that, if they can avoid getting into a bidding war, they might be able to snap up Costa for somewhere between €40 to €50 million. In a world where Kepa Arrizabalaga cost €80 million and Andre Onana a potential €55 million, that could prove to be a bit of a bargain. For now, though, Costa is playing for Porto and deservedly features in third. Second, Victor Osimhen. There are some things that you just shouldn't find in certain places. A Siberian tiger in Scunthorpe, for example, a freshly laid turd in a bath, or a sexual predator in the White House. The fun thing about that last one is that it could be 2 different presidents just from the modern era, and by fun, what I mean there, of course, is extremely depressing. Another example would be Victor Osimhen in the Turkish Super League. Sorry, that was the segue. I got a bit distracted there. Victor Osimhen is one of the best centre-forwards in the world. He was commonly recognised as such in the 2022-23 season, when he was probably the best striker in the world, scoring 31 goals and firing Napoli to a Serie A title, and he didn't cease to be that when he only scored 17 goals last season, missing about 15 games through injury. The only reason that Victor Osimhen is playing in Turkey this season is because Napoli accepted an €80 million bid from Al Ahly, who offered him a reported €770,000 a week 4-year deal worth €160 million in total, but that move collapsed either because Osimhen turned it down, not wanting to give up on competing at the highest level, and moved to Saudi Arabia at the age of 25, or because Napoli changed their price at the last minute, depending upon which report you believe. Osimhen's preferred destination was reportedly Chelsea, who were big admirers, but that deal also collapsed on deadline day due to complications. It was reported by some outlets that Chelsea had offered a contract worth less than half of what Osimhen was already earning at Napoli, and therefore less than a sixth of the salary offer that he'd already turned down from Al Ahly. In the meantime, however, Napoli had broken the bank to bring in Romelu Lukaku, and their relationship with Osimhen had deteriorated to such an extent that he was left out of their squad for the upcoming season. With the Big 5 league transfer windows all having shut, Turkey's later deadline of September 15th provided Galatasaray with an opportunity to sign a world-class centre-forward that would otherwise have seemed unimaginable. A ferocious competitor, an incredible athlete, and a lethal goalscorer, Osimhen is rapid, powerful, and his movement is just about as good as it gets. Not brilliant at pressing from the front, not the most creative, and technically fine but not outstanding, Osimhen has an amazing ability to turn hopeful balls into excellent ones due to his athleticism and intelligence. He is lethal on the counter-attack, and almost unstoppable when in full flow. His start at Galatasaray has been hampered by injuries, but he has still scored 4 goals and made 4 assists in only 8 appearances in the Turkish Super League and Europa League, averaging a goal contribution once every 60 minutes. Without being disrespectful to Turkey's top flight, in a league where a 38-year-old Edin Dzeko scored 21 goals last season, and Eder Valencia bagged 29 the season before that, there is really no reason why a fully fit Victor Osimhen can't maintain that level of output throughout the entire campaign, before, hopefully, and again, respectfully, returning to an elite-level league where he belongs. Or just run off to Saudi when he realises that they offered him €160 million for 4 years and that he had missed a zero. Who knows? Either way, he features in second. First, Viktor Gyökeres. It's a couple of Victors in first and second, and both Viktor Gyökeres and Victor Osimhen are centre-forwards. Both are in their mid-20s, and both of them are probably currently trying to be convinced by Manchester United that, despite being 13th, they're still a super club worth joining. A predictable top spot in many ways, not least because I probably put him in the thumbnail, I'd imagine. I make those after I've written and recorded these videos. Viktor Gyökeres might not be playing in the most high-profile league, but his exploits in front of goal have made him one of the game's most high-profile strikers, even at Sporting this season. A lot of people have been shocked by Gyökeres' impact at Sporting, and, admittedly, it has been phenomenal, but the big Swedish goal-getter was incredible at Coventry in the Championship, which is arguably a more difficult league to score goals in than the Premier Liga, at least when you're playing for one of the big three. Before you all hound me in the comments, Óscar Estupiñán scored 15 goals in 28 games for Vitória de Guimarães in Portugal's top flight, and only 13 in 35 for Hull City in the Championship the following season, along with Gyökeres' massively increased output, so I really don't think that is a particularly outlandish claim. I told an Arsenal supporting friend of mine that they could do a lot worse than signing Gyökeres in the summer of 2023, but bizarrely, in my opinion, Wolves were the only Premier League team who seemed to express a serious interest. Clearly, Gyökeres' €20 million price tag, rising to €24 million subject to add-ons, was much too cheap for Premier League teams. No. Far better to pay 2, 3, or even 4 times that amount in a couple of years' time. Well, that is where we are now. Noted for his goal scoring, for obvious reasons, Gyökeres has scored 66 goals in 67 games since joining Sporting, including goals against Benfica, Porto, and a recent hat-trick against Man City, but his all-round game is just as impressive. Powerful and aggressive, Gyökeres is an incredible athlete. He uses his body masterfully, his first touch is solid, and his decision-making is efficient and intelligent. He wouldn't replicate his current output in the Premier League, that would put him on par with Erling Haaland, and as good as he is, I don't think he's quite that good, but for all of the false dawns that we have had with Premier League strikers, whether that be Jackson Martinez, Islam Slimani, or Mario Jardel, I do think Gyökeres is the real deal, certainly good enough to start for either Arsenal or Man United, and that's not just based upon his lightning-quick start this season, which makes him possibly the most informed player on the planet right now. Gyökeres has a €100 million release clause, but according to a recent article in The Telegraph, Sporting would be willing to entertain offers of €75 million. That doesn't make much sense to me, with Gyökeres about as valuable an asset and as impactful of a player as we have seen in the modern Premier League era, but then again, electing a sexual predator also doesn't make much sense to me, and over 70 million Americans have done that, so, again, who knows, we'll just have to wait and see. That is it for my 7, and I won't go through all of my shortlist as honourable mentions, as half of them would have joined Big 5 league clubs by the time that I'd finished, but Sporting's Francisco Trincão and Gonçalo Inácio came close to featuring. I wanted to include at least one Eredivisie player, but I couldn't quite justify putting any of Santiago Jimenez, Joey Veerman, or Malik Tillman above Pedro Gonçalves, but none of them were too far off, and likewise, it feels wrong for no Campeonato Brasileiro players to get a look in, but Richard Rios, Luis Enrique, Pedro, Fabrizio Bruno, Thiago Almada, and probably actually most notably of all Mateus Pereira, all just missed out for the same reason as the Eredivisie boys. Another Brazilian, Claudinho, I still think is an amazing footballer, wasted in a Zenit St. Petersburg team that is currently exiled from UEFA competitions, albeit I haven't seen much of him recently for that exact reason, from the MLS, which is heavily impacted by the no over 30s rule, like the Saudi Pro League. The likes of Facundo Torres, Cucho Hernandez, Ryan Gould and Ricky Puig all earn a mention. And speaking of the Saudi Pro League, 24-year-old Mohamed Samakan, previously a transfer target for Newcastle and Chelsea at RB Leipzig, but now of Al Nassr, and 29-year-old Sergej Milinkovic-Savic both came close to featuring. Last but not least, there is a young number 10 called Alexei Batrikov who is making waves right now in Russia. Age 19, Batrikov plays off the cuff, he has fantastic invention, and he can score goals with either foot. I wasn't going to include him because I've never watched him play a full 90 minutes. It is hard to properly assess the standard of the Russian Premier League while its clubs are exiled from UEFA, and this is only his breakout campaign. But he had an outstanding youth team record, and he has scored 9 goals and made 8 assists from only 18 appearances for Lokomotiv Moscow's first team this season. A goal contribution every 83 minutes from attacking midfield in your breakout campaign at 19 isn't bad going, so while he doesn't feature, Batrikov is someone who is certainly worth keeping an eye on if a Big 5 league team is able to get him out of Moscow. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments and how those 7 compare to the 7 from 7 years ago. If you wish, you don't have to, just, the option stands. And make sure, of course, that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, not just for this channel, HITC Sevens, but also my second channel, Alfie Potsama, both of which should be about to appear on your screens now, so, it's really easy to do, along with a couple of videos that you might fancy watching after this one. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads via the username at HITC Sevens on all 3, should you wish to do so. And all of those things that I just mentioned and some other things that I haven't should be down in the video description below. Cheers!